Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of On Attachment. In today's episode of Ask Steph, I am answering the listener question of what do you think about the phrase, if they wanted to, they would. So this is a phrase that bounces around a lot online. You've probably heard of it, but basically the idea is if someone wanted to do something, they would. So if they're not doing it, it's because they don't want to, they don't care, they're not invested, they don't love you, whatever. And I certainly have some thoughts on this. Okay, so to start, I think we have to distinguish between different situations and different maybe levels of effort. So if we are talking about if someone wanted to answer the phone when you ring them, they would. I think that that's probably true. And to the extent that someone is really denying you bare minimum courtesy and effort, whether that's in a relationship or in early dating, there's probably some truth to the fact that someone's level of effort, as you've observed it, reflects their level of interest. So if you're in the early stages of dating and you have no idea what's going on and someone messages you once every 2 weeks after you matched on an app, it's probably safe to assume that they're not terribly interested. And if they were interested, then they would be showing that through demonstrated consistent effort and you wouldn't be left guessing. So I think in that sort of scenario, that if they wanted to, they would advice can be true and can apply. Where I take issue with the if they wanted to, they would is when we're talking about capacity in a relationship to do things that are genuinely challenging for a lot of people, right? And I think that the easiest way to demonstrate the point is to flip it around. And if I said to you, if you wanted to stop being so anxious, you would. Or if you wanted to trust your partner, you would. That's just not true. And we know that that's not true because there are lots of things that stand in the way of what we want and what we're able to do at any given time for a whole host of reasons, right? So if someone's giving you the advice, or if you're reading online, if they wanted to not be so avoidant, they would. If they wanted to, communicate better, they would. If they wanted to be more affectionate, they would. I don't think that that's the whole picture, and I don't think that that's fair, because what that is missing is this point around capacity and all of the protective mechanisms and strategies that might sit between where someone is now and where they might like to be, or where you might like them to be. And so just simplifying it to the point of, if you cared, or if you loved me, or if you wanted to, you would suddenly do all of these things that actually are really hard for you. I don't think that that's fair or reasonable, and I don't think it's honest. Now, what does that mean for a relationship? I think this is where we sort of take our power and agency back and we go, okay, recognizing what's within my control. I can certainly make requests of someone. I can certainly set forth my non-negotiables, my deal breakers, what's going to work for me, what isn't going to work for me in a relationship. I can decide whether I'm willing to accept someone as they are with their current constraints, or, set forth a path of growth for both of us that we're aligned on, that we're working towards. All of those things are great. But what we don't want to do is say to someone, the fact that you're not able to do these things means that you don't care or don't love me. I think the more self-responsible and mature thing is, can I accept your capacity constraints? And if not, can I decide that this relationship maybe isn't for me? Because I think the corollary of if they wanted to, they would, is making a judgment of that person for the fact that they're not doing it and saying, you're just selfish, or you're uncaring, or you're toxic, or you're emotionally unavailable, or whatever. We're making them wrong for what they are currently unable to do. And again, going back to the analogy of, you're not able to spontaneously become less anxious just by force of will. Neither are they able to just stop being so avoidant because they would like to. Those strategies and protective mechanisms run deep for them just as they do for you. And we all come by these patterns honestly, meaning no one's setting out with some agenda to try and, hurt others in relationship. I do really believe that we're all just trying to keep ourselves safe and navigate situations the only way we know. And it takes time to shift those things. So focusing less on willingness and more on capacity when it comes to those more thorny issues in relationship of, how someone shows up in moments of stress. I think that that's a more nuanced and more realistic and honest view of what's really going on there when someone is trying to make changes but maybe isn't, or seems to be unable to do the thing that feels so obvious to you. As I said, I think there's a real distinction that needs to be made between basic acts of decency and like bigger changes around, relationships and how someone navigates those and shows up, particularly under stress, because that is really what our attachment patterns are all about, is what do we resort to when we're under immense stress? And those things are harder to shift. So just saying if they wanted to be different, they would, is not true for them in the same way that it's not true for you. And so I think focusing more on someone's self-awareness, their desire to change, because if they have no interest in changing, then your next inquiry might be, well, can I accept them as they are? Or do I want to be with someone who is at least growth oriented if it feels like there are some big issues in the relationship that can't continue as is indefinitely? So that's my take on the if they wanted to, they would. I hope that that's helpful. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to share in the comments on Spotify or on YouTube. And if you'd like to submit a question for a future episode of Ask Steph, you can do so in my Instagram stories each week or in the YouTube comments section as well. Okay, hope that's helpful. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you again soon.